Now, one other rumor that has started to surface, we've heard this name a bunch of times, and it's been kind of one of those, wow, if the Bengals could get this guy, they'd really have a successful offseason. Obviously, the price tag being what it is and everything. And we'll talk about that. This is going to kind of segue into a free agency profile that we're going to talk about. But this is from Andrew Filipponi, who covers the Steelers on Twitter here. And this came out today, this afternoon or evening for some. It was it Jeremy Hathorn? Jeff Hathorn, who also works for a local radio station in Pittsburgh, 93.7 The Fan. Quote, I think you could put the Ryan Jensen rumor to bed. 95% he ends up in Cincinnati. Now, I did look at the @JHathorn, at least recent tweets and whatnot. There doesn't seem to be a ton of insider information there in terms of, breaking where players are going to land, John. But I don't. But we'll talk about Ryan Jensen's strengths, weaknesses, pros, cons, all that kind of stuff, and a little bit of background as we look at his profile. But on the surface of this rumor, what do you make of that in terms of that 95% chance he ends up in Cincinnati from someone who covers the Steelers? And the Steelers are a team that are reportedly very interested in Jensen as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you did some background on him because I wanted to do some too. I wanted to make sure that wasn't the same dude that was clowning Bengals fans for going. I think it was from that same. It could be from the same radio station, but I don't know. What I would assume is that since he's, I would assume, connected to the Steelers, he covers the Steelers for that radio. I would assume he has sources inside of the Steelers building. The Steelers have interest in Ryan Jensen. Maybe a source who doesn't want to be named is hearing that Jensen is likely to end up elsewhere. In this case, it is probably going to be Cincinnati. So it's probably going to be between Tampa and the Bengals because the Buccaneers love to retain their own. I don't know what their cap situation is now that Tom Brady is going to be retired. I think his contract is still technically on the books right now, and they're in the red in terms of cap room. But like they are going to make a push for him, and they can structure it in a way that they can fit it under the cap. But there is significant smoke with Ryan Jensen in that name in the Bengals. There's now been several reports connecting the two sides and enough to make you believe that is legitimate. I don't really have a comment on the whole 95%. I think that's just it could be what he's quoting from someone inside the Steelers organization who again may or may not have the correct information as to what Jensen's market is or where he's going to end up. But some of these guys are connected more so than others, and I think that just further corroborates what we've been hearing about this name and the whole argument of are the Bengals going to match an offer for Jensen or whatnot. At the very least, he seems to be the guy or one of the guys that they're going to target and at least be serious about bringing in.
It seems that is where their interests lie, whether it's Bozeman, whether it's Ryan Jensen. And, last week we did Morgan Moses as a free agency profile for the Bengals here, and there hasn't been really any rumors of the team being connected to him. Moses has since not been franchise tagged as we predicted by the Jets, so he will be a free agent option, and maybe the Bengals pursue that as a right tackle option. But there continues to be rumors of the Bengals being interested in Ryan Jensen. That's just kind of the reality of it. So let's take a look at Ryan Jensen here in terms of a little bit of a profile. There he is. We had a great question in one of our comments, I think, about Morgan Moses asking, how did he do against the Bengals? We'll have to do a little more research on that. But Jensen hasn't played the Bengals in a while. I think it was since Jameis Winston was the quarterback is the last time he had played the Bengals. So there's not really a lot of recent context there. But a guy who had a really good season, oddly enough, entering his 9th season last year as an eight-year guy. He made a Pro Bowl last year, but he's 6'4", 320. He's 30 years old, going to be 31 in May. Again, he's entering his 9th season, much like, there's just issues with age potentially. Went to Colorado State, Pueblo. He had a pretty good PFF score overall last season, 70.3. I think Morgan Moses, we had said, was in the low 70s as well, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, these aren't guys that are, the top of the PFF list, but they're solid. And there's a reason why this guy made a Pro Bowl this last season, was previously with the Ravens. So has, AFC North familiarity. You see there the recent high level of play, the 2021 Pro Bowler. Durability, even though he's getting up there in age, he does have 87 straight starts. Hasn't missed a game since I think it was 2014. Known as a good leader, and then does have some outside zone familiarity. You can see the 19 to 28%. That's based on the kind of personnel that the Tampa was running there. The 28% was at the high end of things in terms of Buccaneers run plays. Again, the age, he's going to be 31 by the time he would suit up potentially for the Bengals. Appears to be price issues in terms of how much the Bengals would maybe be willing to pay him. And so that would probably be one of the only things that would prohibit him, as we talk about how the Bengals structure contracts, et cetera. That may be one of the only things that prohibits him from being a Cincinnati Bengal, John. And then, of course, there are a lot of kind of coinciding with the price issue. There are a lot of teams reportedly interested in his service. So and a lot of those teams, I think, are in the AFC North. So, I mean, there's some interest there, which, and then you kind of also go along with the price. Does the age, does that PFF score, all of that, does that match a mega contract that would probably need to be given out to a Jensen for a position that the Bengals haven't paid regularly in center? So your thoughts on him and his fit with the Bengals, reality of him being a Cincinnati Bengal going forward?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it's not just the Steelers and Bengals. I mean, he came into the league with the Ravens, and the Ravens have interest in bringing him back, which kind of tells you that Bradley Bozeman is going to be somewhere else, and maybe the Jets make that payment for him. I believe like the Jets and Jaguars are in on Bozeman, and like we talk all of this about Ryan Jensen, then he just goes back to his former team, the Ravens, because of course, I think with Jensen, the PFF scores have been brought up a lot, and he gets knocked for some true pass set scores and whatnot. And sometimes he has some ugly wins here or ugly losses here and there. Maybe it doesn't always look pretty flashy and whatnot, but the general consensus is that the guy is just rock solid consistent, and that's just something that the Bengals haven't had in the interior offensive line in a long time. I'm a resident Trey Hopkins stan. I think he's a great player for just how he came into the NFL and where he's developed to now. But like, even though Trey Hopkins has some good things going for him, Ryan Jensen's just a step above him, and that may not be reflective in the PFF grades, which I think hold a ton of validity. But you watch Ryan Jensen, the football player, and you just know that he's a very good player, even now entering his 30s, which is why teams are reportedly willing to pay north of 13, 14, even $15 million per year for him. There's not really a scheme that he doesn't really fit. There's some minor concerns with him, fitting in like a wide zone scheme because he's not the ultra uber athlete that a guy like a Jason Kelsey is. But Frank Pollack wants quote unquote glass eaters. Ryan Jensen eats glass for breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert.
Yes, he does.
He's the nastiest block. He's one of the nastiest blockers in the game. Just look at him. He like that guy is not tough, or he's not tough. Just looking at the guy, like you know exactly what type of tone that he sets, and it's a very fierce one. There's some validity to being a leader on a Super Bowl team, having that relationship with Tom Brady. Like the guy is going to come in and he's going to establish or continue whatever culture that the Bengals are building right now. And I think that's probably what makes him their top priority in this free agency period. And there's an argument to be made. Are the Bengals willing to match any price that another team kind of counters for him? That remains to be seen. We don't know what type of bag that Ryan Jensen wants, but if the Bengals are the best team that's going after Ryan Jensen's services, and they've been courting him for a while now, and he has a mutual interest with joining Joe Burrow and the Bengals, there's a possibility that they get him for a little bit cheaper than maybe another team would.
And when you talk about, what schemes does he fit, and what the Buccaneers like to do over the past couple of seasons with Brady, and what the Bengals are trying to build in Cincinnati, we're not going to send Joe Burrow to the Tom Brady level quite yet, but he is on a very good career pace, especially making a Super Bowl in his second NFL season. And you see the Buccaneers style where they employ Fournette and other backs that are doing different things in their system. You see before Antonio Brown became Antonio Brown once again this year, potentially, and whatever side you want to take with the team or him or whatever. Before all of that, you had Godwin, Brown, Mike Evans. The Bengals have T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, right? I mean, so there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of offensive, I guess, visions that you would say, okay, that would make sense for Jensen here. Again, the age, we can talk about how durable he is, and we've seen the Bengals bring in these durable guys, and it has not worked out as such. So, John, I think my main concern, I mean, yeah, the money is a concern, especially because it's not my money that's being spent, but the money is a concern, but it's more the age and are you going to get true life out of that contract? I would assume he's probably going to get as he enters this season, he's going to be 31 years old, maybe a 3-year deal. I would assume that's probably what teams are looking at. You know, are you going to see the value out of that contract? Are you comfortable, even with the 87 straight starts and all of that, hasn't missed a game since, 5-6 years ago? Are you comfortable with a long-term deal to a guy at that age?
Yeah, the interesting thing to me is, I mean, yes, he came from the Ravens, but I feel like he wasn't a known player for them when he was there, and then the Buccaneers out of nowhere gave him like a 4-year, $42 million deal. His rise to that deal is actually very reminiscent of Trey Hopkins. He had, if I'm counting this correctly, 6 contracts with the Ravens, and all 6 of them expired at some point. Like, he was on the practice squad, he was waived, he was a street free agent, he was an exclusive rights free agent like twice. I don't know if he had the injury issues that Hopkins did, but the point is, he came into the league at 23 years old, but he didn't actually start playing until like his mid to almost late 20s. So yes, he's 30 years old, and yes, he's been in the league since I believe 2013, but I don't think he has the necessarily wear and tear on his knees and feet that another offensive lineman at 30 years old does, which is maybe why teams are still willing to extend him for multiple years now at the age of 30. The big question to me is that, are the Bengals willing, are they truly comfortable doing this? Because they've developed habits recently to only give big money to guys in their mid-20s. And Ryan Jensen would be by far the oldest free agent they've signed like a multi-year deal with in quite some time, if not since Antoine Odom or something like that. So like, at least in the Zach Taylor era, they've gone after guys like DJ Reader, Von Bell, guys who are 26, 27 years old. Ryan Jensen's a little bit on the older side, but I don't like you said, he's been durable, so there's no concerns in terms of injuries with that. But also, I think he's kind of a young 30, if you will, because he doesn't have as much playing history, and obviously the consistency shows for itself.
It does. I think it would be a very exciting move for the team. There would be some risk to it. I don't know. Depending on what the price is, I don't know that you would see the full value of that if you want to gauge it on PFF scores and where those have been, like you said, recently, and or just the age and games you get out of them. But I think this is an upgrade move for the Bengals if they do that. And the one thing you mentioned, it's a great point, that in the last couple of off seasons, they are tendering contracts to young free agents. This is a guy who's a bit older. That kind of says we sense the championship window is continuing to be open here, and we got to seize this. We got to get a guy who is valuable. And of course, the leadership aspect and all of that, we got to get a guy to help anchor the middle of our offensive line, even if it's for 2 years, 3 years. And he seems to be the guy to do it. And we'll see if the Bengals land him, but there is no shortage of rumors of them being connected to him and or interested in him for sure.
Yeah, and I think obviously they recognize that interior offensive line is a clear and obvious weakness, and we know that they have an inhibition about paying guards, so maybe this is just their compromise. Maybe if they believe that they get a top-tier center to fill out the middle of that offensive line, then things will start trending back upwards, and maybe they can get some development at guard. Like, obviously, another solution would just to be pay guards and whatnot, but if they're compromised, if they're meeting halfway is to pay a center, then they see Jensen as the best option. And maybe if there were other potential options, if there are other top centers available on the market who are a little bit younger, maybe that's where their attention would be. But this is kind of the playing field that they have. It's either him or Bozeman, and at this point, you have to think that one of them is going to be a Bengal. And maybe like Bozeman, is going, because he's younger, and he has maybe like his best days ahead of him. Maybe that's why the Bengals are focusing on Jensen. Maybe Bozeman will get more real money, and he will attract the likes of the Jets and Jags who are willing to pay that.
Yeah, that's a good point, but we'll see what happens. I'm with you. I don't like to assume, but I am under the belief. I'm just avoiding the word assume. I really do think that one of those two guys are going to be pushed heavily for and or become a Bengal, either Bozeman or Jensen. There's a lot of rumors around him. I think the Bengals are really going to commit to fixing that offensive line, and we'll see what happens. But Jensen is one of the guys. Moses, like I said, Moses last week wasn't a guy necessarily that we've heard a lot of rumors about with the Bengals, really any rumors about the Bengals being connected with him, but he could be a viable short-term right tackle option. This is a guy who, in Jensen, is a guy who maybe be a little bit longer-term solution potentially at center, but there are the rumors there, so we wanted to at least talk about him a little bit.